Welcome to Art School Live. Our guest today is Patrick Okrasinski. Did I get it right?
Very close. Okrasinski.
Okrasinski. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
I'm known for botching names. Patrick, what are you going to do for us today?
Today, I'm going to be showing some of my little secrets on finishing a realistic seascape painting. I've got this painting that I dropped in the sand after I finished painting it one day, and so I figured.
Wait. You said you dropped it in the sand?
I dropped it in the sand. I was out there in plein air, and it was a really windy day, and I was just about to put it in my panel carrier, and it didn't quite go where I wanted it to go.
So what did you do?
I let it dry for about a day, and then I scraped out as much of the sand as I could. So right now I have a very smooth surface that's obviously very dry. I don't think I have any sand left, a little bit, but now it's missing a whole lot of texture. It's missing a whole lot of refinement, a lot of details, and there's a lot of intricacies when it comes to wave painting. So the anatomy of a wave, texture, and that's what I'm going to be doing with this painting now.
Okay, so what you're going to do, you're going to actually teach us the principles or the secrets of painting a wave or a seascape, and you're going to use one that you already did, but you're going to instruct us along the way of what you did. And then you said to me earlier, the devil is in the details, right? To make it really realistic looking, then you've got to add the details. So we're going to actually get to see how you finish a painting, right?
At least part of it,
Okay, well, maybe not the whole thing.
40 minutes isn't a whole lot of time, but we'll get to some really fun stuff.
Yeah, okay, cool. Well, we'll get the show started, and then we'll be right back with you painting.
Awesome.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhoads. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhoads.
Art School Live, I'm Eric, and Patrick Okrasinski is our guest today. He's a fabulous painter. He is hot, and you need to know about him. He's going to teach you today how to refine, actually how to make a seascape painting. He did this seascape painting on location, and then he dropped it in the sand, and he's going to show you how to fix it. But he's also going to show you how to do seascape paintings in general. So this is going to be a double lesson. It's really good. I have a prize for you today. If you leave a comment, any comment, hopefully a nice one, not too nasty, leave a comment in the comments section, whether you're watching on replay or live, and you have a chance to win value specs that help you see and learn values. And quite frankly, I use them all the time because I always struggle with values. I think we all do. We also have a winner from our last broadcast, but I can't see it. So let's see who the winner is. Okay, it's Lucy Yanagida of Colorado. Lucy is winning a subscription to our magazine Plein Air. All right, Lucy. We also have a free gift for you, and it is a brand new book, a brand new ebook called 201 Essential Plein Air Tips and Master the Art of Outdoor Painting. And this has got a lot of tips from a lot of great artists. And this is brand new. So if you don't have it, just go to outdoorpainter.com/ebook. It's yours for free. And we would love to be able to give it to you. And it is packed with ideas. I'm anxious. I haven't actually seen the final one. I'm anxious to see it. Okay. And if you tune into this broadcast every day, 12 noon on YouTube, and also oftentimes on Facebook, we're here every day, 12 noon. And we've been here since COVID began. I don't know how many days that is. We should have a day countdown. Yeah, let's do that. Anyway, the idea is that we want to teach you art, no matter what level you're at, whether you're a beginner, whether you believe you can't do it, whatever it is, we want to teach you. And we have different artists on every day. So we hope you'll join us. Okay, now we're getting back to Patrick. And Patrick, let's take it away.
All right, I'm in. Cool.
You're in.
So, all right, starting. What you guys can't see, it's a little bit down, but the first thing I had to do starting my painting was mixing up a nice consistent palette string. So I've got that sitting at the bottom over here, and it's not very fancy. I just have two strings, a relatively gray, coolish string, and then a slightly greenish
Can you
string.
point your camera down and hold it there for a minute so we can see what you've done?
So,
All right. So show us what the strings.
so I've got the most important color that I'm using today is actually my white. I have a whole bunch of white. There's one brush that's just loaded up with white, and to be specific, this is the Michael Harding Kremnitz white with walnut. So it's a lead white, and I find that's one of the most important things for me when I'm making paintings that are multi-layer paintings, but also uh, textural paintings. And so the multi-day paintings, because I find titanium can sometimes discolor and lead doesn't do that. And then I basically have the colors of the white water, of the foams. So some of the shadows in here, some of the shadows of the flat planes of the waves, and then going up into the darker aspects of the water. And then some of the greens, that is some of the dirty water that has sand mixing into it. And those greens are visible on the tops, the peaks of the wave before it breaks over. And in some of the transparent water that's really light.
All right. Okay. Well, let's get to painting.
Cool. So the important thing about working on paintings for multiple days, I know, there's a lot of beauty to the alla prima sketch and to doing a painting in one session and getting it right. But sometimes I really like working up a painting and spending a lot of time on it and, really trying to aim for some refinements that are really hard to capture in just a single session. The first thing I need to do when I'm painting this, other than mix my value string, is rework some of the painting and reactivate some of these areas. So right now I'm taking a bunch of this lead white and I'm just covering over the same areas that are already white. And
Are you
so
using thick or thin paint?
it's really thick, it's really pasty. I'm not using any medium right now.
And are you
And
using pure white?
it's almost pure white. There's a little bit of green that mixed into it by accident on my palette, but this is an area that I want to keep textural in my painting, especially the white water, especially some of these foams down here. I want to use a lot of texture in those areas to represent the character of what it is that I'm painting. In this case, it's, rushing water coming towards us. There's a whole lot of foam, and so that's a really nice moment for texture. Areas back here in the distance, in the depth, I'm not going to build the texture in there. I'm also not going to build the texture in these shadows. I want to have a variety of texture, and I want to have a hierarchy of what that texture is actually relating to. So first step is to reactivate some of these areas. And you don't need to be super neat. It is nice to, even on a second day of a painting that you're trying to bring up and make realistic, it is nice to have some of that looseness. So I'm not being too careful. I just really wanted to get going. And then the other thing, I'm going to start bringing in, making sure here in the shadow. Now, it looks like I'm almost not doing anything, but that is actually key because I need to make sure that the paint that I'm putting down perfectly matches the paint that's already there. Because, and this is one of the secrets to working up a painting in your studio after you've begun it plein air, the biggest difficulty in going from plein air to studio painting, sometimes I start a lot of studio paintings outside and I finish them in the studio, and ultimately that's why I consider them studio paintings. The biggest difficulty is capturing the light and color and maintaining that throughout the painting. And it can be super easy to get lost if we're just a little careless, because all of a sudden we have all these little tiny mistakes and all of a sudden they add up and they add up, and then our painting looks nothing like it did a second ago. So that's looking pretty good. I'm gonna start mixing some of the greens up to here. The reason we see waves go from a dark to a green is because of the transparency of the water, but also usually ocean water is a little bit dirty. There's all this sand that's swirling around in it. And so, oh, that's way, way too dark right up here. I'm gonna have to fix that. So because the wave comes up, this water is really transparent. Usually there's a little bit of light, ambient light or direct sunlight filtering through the painting, and that's why it's hitting that top of the wave and making it a lot lighter.
So even on a gray day, that happens.
Yeah, it's much more subtle on a gray day. You know, if you're somewhere tropical like Florida or the Caribbean and it's a sunny blue day, you'll see that water be really crisp, really clear. You can almost paint that with like pure cadmium yellow and ultramarine blue. It's a very clean, very bright yellowish green. But in our case, this is a very moody painting. I think it was like Hurricane Irene coming through back in September. So I was painting it that weekend and it overshot. So it didn't come anywhere near New Jersey. But there was some really fun surf.
Looks like fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a massive storm. I was in Florida this week. We had a massive storm, tropical level storm. And I wanted to go out to the ocean and paint, but I couldn't, my easel wouldn't have stood up. It was too stormy.
Ooh. Was it close by?
It was in Florida.
Was the storm close off the coast?
Oh, it was all over it. It was right there. And it lasted for 24 hours.
Yeah, that sounds a little scary. The easel I'm using right now is just a tripod easel. And so I have a camera tripod that's called a Siri 5CX. It's a carbon fiber and the legs stick out. And so it's surprisingly stable if the legs are in the medium position. They stick
Right.
out at about 120 degrees and I use my backpack to weigh it down. But then the easel rocks back and forth in the wind a little bit like that.
Yeah.
That's the only downside.
Yeah.
So one of the ways that I am assessing the color right now, it's back to the basics. A lot of my paintings, I don't have a lot of conventions if you think of secrets, but my real secret is just really solid fundamentals of mixing color and drawing. And when it comes to painting waves, I'll get into the anatomy of the wave a little bit. But the biggest challenge sometimes is being honest with yourself. Is the color I'm putting down really the right color? Is that really the right gradient? I should also say I'm using a couple different brushes. So I have 3 different types of brushes that I'm using. So first I have my tried and true filbert bristles. And then what I'm using right now are some sable rounds. And these sable rounds are really good with a lot of small vertical strokes. You can create a really, really neat gradient.
Yeah.
And
So sables are really, really soft.
Yeah. The brush I started using is called a Rosemary Long Filbert Master's Choice. It's a synthetic badger mongoose imitation, one or the other, I forget which. And it holds the paint in a really interesting way and puts down the texture. And so there's a little bit more freedom with those. And that's what I really like about them. So I'm really going to be focusing on this area because I'd say that this is the focal point of my painting. One of the things I do when I start painting is I ask myself, when start painting in the studio other than plein air painting, because I already have the big impression of the painting, the composition's there, the colors there, the lights there. What I want to ask myself is what really is the focus of this painting? What's the aha moment? This moment, right as the wave is breaking and it curls over and the barrel just starts to form and we have the lip of the wave all coming down to the shoulder, that's usually one of the areas that I'm most drawn to composing around when it comes to wave painting. So that's what I'm going to focus in on. Now, working into this area of the wave, one of the trickiest things about painting waves is realizing that we think the foam is white, but it's not really white. There's actually a lot of value and even a lot of color in it.
I'm back. I'm having a good time. It's nice to be back. I'm in my studio in Texas now. And I was in Florida last week, all week. I did a broadcast from there. I didn't have a studio there. And the week before that, it was driving. The week before that, it was Spain and Sweden. And it's been kind of crazy. So I'm looking forward to stabilizing a little bit. And I'm looking forward to Watercolor Live, which is coming up in January. We've got some great watercolor masters, some of which are they're all really, really brilliant. So you want to make sure that you come to this. Well, this is our largest online event. It's thousands of people who love watercolor, and it's so much fun to have people teaching and attending from all over the world. We would like to invite you to come. It's in January. It's going to be cold and miserable in a lot of the world anyway, so might as well come. We also have another event coming up in the spring in March. It's called Plein Air Live. You want to be thinking about that if you want to learn landscape painting and plein air painting. And we have the Plein Air Convention, which is coming up May 20th. In Cherokee, North Carolina. That's the Great Smoky Mountains. And we're also going to go to the Biltmore Estate and paint there. This is the first time the Plein Air Convention has come east of the Mississippi. Everybody's been begging us to do that. And we were a little nervous because, a lot of our attendees come from the West. And thought, well, we'll move it. We'll try it. But everybody said, yeah, everybody's going to fill up. It's going to fill up. Well, so far that's true. So let's hope it keeps going. Anyway, Plein Air Convention is coming up. You want to do that. The other thing that I want to tell you about is that I'm taking a group of people to Japan. It's a rare opportunity to paint cherry blossoms in Japan. It's touring. We're going to tour three major cities, beautiful areas, and we're going painting every day. We will paint every day. There may be one day that we're not, but we're doing all kinds of touristy things too. It's going to be fun. It's a VIP level trip. It's a high-end trip. And we had a couple of slots open up because somebody had to cancel because of a medical issue. And so everybody's been begging us to get more. So if you want to get in that, go to pleinairjapan.com and sign up fast because this is going to be the trip of a lifetime and I'm not going back. I think we've got Patrick set up again. Patrick, are you ready?
I think so. Does it look good?
It's, I think so. Let's keep going anyway. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
All right.
What I did is I restarted it and it looked a little bit crisper, but I really don't know what's causing that.
Might be your internet. Okay, let's keep going. In case you're tuning in, our guest today is Patrick Okrasinski, and he's painting. He's fixing a seascape painting that he did, and teaching us the principles of waves. All right, keep going.
Cool. So I think the last thing I was talking about before our little technical difficulties was about how white isn't necessarily always white. And what I mean by that is the white water, the foam that is created by the breaking of the waves. Sometimes it's white, but really, oftentimes there's a lot of tonality to it. There's a lot of subtle, nuanced, chromatic grays. And I covered it in white for the first step because I wanted to reactivate that area, because I can't paint into just a perfectly dry thing. I want to paint wet into wet. I think that's generally the principle if we think of when Sargent would scrape his paintings down after every single session. There's something about painting wet into wet, but there's something else about layering a painting, adding refinement. And so I reactivated this area by putting down a whole bunch of white. And now I have a gray that I can come in and start working in. And so I'm going to work in thinking about the form of the water, because we need to remember about planes. We can't forget about planes, even if we're working on something as amalgamous as, the foam.
Can you explain planes? I don't think people think you're referring to what's flying overhead, but a lot of people might not know that term.
That's true. I'm not. So what I mean by planes is upright planes or downward planes or slanting planes. And if any intermediate painter is probably already familiar with this concept, they might not be familiar with it in terms of seascape painting. I think a lot of people overlook it. But what that means is, do I have a piece of white paper? So I have this little piece of white paper. If I hold it directly to the light, it's going to be colorful. But if I bend it from the light, there's a value that's being created, right? And that is the plane, the angle compared to the light. It can be in shadow, but that exists in water and in seascape painting. And so the planes of the foam are very opaque. The planes of the water are a bit more transparent. So the opaqueness of the foam versus the transparency of the water is something we need to consider. The planes of the opaque foam of the white water after the wave has broken, generally we can think of the top planes and the side planes, and maybe we'll see a little bit of underplanes. The lighting scenario right now, there isn't a strong directional light because it's an ambient light. The sun is being filtered through the clouds, and so there's ambience coming up top. But the darkest parts of the wave are going to be a little bit on the sides of the wave, but also on the undersides. So if I'm thinking of my lightest value, my middle value, my darkest value, that form starts to turn. Easy enough to follow? Not too confusing?
Yeah, you did a great job.
Right. So what I'm starting to do now is turning the form of these waves carefully. This is actually a round filbert. And round filberts are interesting because they can add little bits of pouncings. The other thing about foams in whitewater is that sometimes they're like a bunch of cotton balls or a bunch of scoops of ice cream. They're all these different round things. And so I'm going to create some smaller planes just by coming in with a little bit of a darker value and mixing it up. And then what happens over here on the top of the barrel, so the reason that whitewater is created, it's because of the air that gets trapped in the water as the water collapses over the air, and all of a sudden all that air comes into the water, and it's basically like foam bubbles, like in a bath. Like if you pour a bunch of water, you'll notice that there'll be really small bubbles, and if you add other things into the water that can make the water inherently a bit more bubbly, that's kind of what is happening. But when the wave breaks, the top of the barrel doesn't quite get those foams. What happens at the top of the barrel is a little bit of that white wispiers are mixed into it, but there also tends to be a lot of a color variation, slightly more green, slightly more yellow ochre-y. And so by adding this more yellowish green, that's starting to represent a different part of the wave, a different quality. And then even this same color that's in here, that usually appears ever so slightly on the back of the wave up here. I'm going to mix in that gradient a little bit, because what happens is the gradient gets from darker to lighter in this part of the wave, as the darkest parts is the depth of the transparent water that's most occluded in shadow. Over here, the darkest part of the wave is at the tip top where the water is cleanest before it comes down, being mixed into the white water that's just broken over. So carefully mixing that gradient. And I'll reach back for some more of my lead white, because over here, I always like these moments at the tip top of the wave. I find those are really fun moments to add some details of little sprays and mists of the water as it's coming and crashing down. And so right now, another thing to be very conscious of is I don't use a whole lot of tools when I'm painting. I just have my brushes and maybe sometimes my palette knife. But the key in applying texture is having creative ways to actually use your brush. So if you could hold it in a different way and sort of drag the sides of it, that'll apply the paint in a slightly different way than a normal brush stroke like that. And that'll break it up. It'll cause some of that variety. Also with the same brush, some bits of the foam are sometimes curl over in a barrel. You can add some details like that. I'll go back in to the underside of this wave. Add some chromatic accents, maybe add a little bit more blues in some areas. And so now, before, this area was completely dead. You know, I had it scraped down, nothing was there. And now I'm starting to add in a lot more refinement and detail. Now, what I can do is I can take this darker gray that's working in these areas, and I could use it for the curls of the foam that come up. And one of the ways I like to paint the inside of the wave is I like to paint the gradient as it rolls up, and then paint the white water, the curls that are following the barrel, paint those on top of that. If I try to paint them separately, it gets a little bit muddy. So the cleanest thing for me to do oftentimes is to just paint it right into it.
I want to remind everybody that Patrick is painting over a plein air study that he did. And he dropped it and got sand all over it, and he wanted to refine it anyway. So he's putting final touches on it. And Patrick, also there was a question about, do you use pure white for your highlights? Looks like not.
It gets a little muddied in. Some of them are. This is probably a pure white. Sometimes, depending on the color of the light, sometimes I might add a little bit of a yellow or a little bit of a blue into my white, depending on the temperature of the light. But because it's an ambient day when the sky's really silvery, I think it's just fine right now to not add any temperature into that.
Also, where you put your pure white is where you really want to draw the eye.
Yeah. Those areas of highest contrast. And right now, this is the area of my highest contrast too, which is the focal point, which is the most interesting point of this painting. So it all sort of adds up. So when I was talking about planes earlier, this is another area that you need to be really conscious of planes. This whitewater, this curl, all the way up to here, this is essentially opaque. You can think of it as that paper that I just had on my desk right next to me. It's a moleskin thing. But as you bend this, it changes in value, right? So the value changes up. With the light source being an ambient light from the top, this flat plane is the lightest value of this water. And as it curls up, it becomes darker. Sometimes on a bright sunny day, we'll notice that I have this painting next to me. Sometimes if you paint a wave painting, if you paint one wave painting, you paint almost every wave painting. This was a single session that didn't fell in the sand, but you can see that here there's a strong sunlight effect because you can see this big cast shadow. So sometimes the light will change and there will be a cast shadow. There's no real cast shadow in here except maybe a little bit of ambiance at the, or occlusion at the very top. But so I'm very careful now as I'm mixing these waves that they get a little bit darker, and that juxtaposes the actual transparent water as it gets a little bit lighter.
Make sure you guys tell us where you're watching from. You have a chance to win a prize today. The prize for leaving a comment in the comment section is a pair of value specs. All right.
Eric, can you tell me more about those value specs? I don't think I've ever heard of them.
Where have you been? Have you been living under a rock?
To me, they sound like glasses that are red, but that's just a wild guess.
Well, you can't buy glasses that are the right red. So essentially, if you, we had a manufacturer create these over in Asia, and we had to go through many iterations of colors to get it right. But what it does is, even though you're seeing red, what it does is it reduces the values down to what you see is black and white, unless you're looking at something that's pure white, and then it looks a little bit red. But I can be painting, for instance, if I'm painting a yellow, yellow is a lower value, but you think it's a higher value because of the high chroma. So when you put these on, all of a sudden you realize, oh, my yellow isn't as bright as it should be, or it's too dark or whatever. And same for all colors. You know, red, for instance, is a lower chroma color too, but you think it's bright because it is bright, but it's not a bright value. So when you do this, I take my underpaintings, I'll do my underpaintings with the value specs on, and that way I nail them perfectly. I look down at my palette, I look up, I get it right. If I'm doing like a black and white underpainting or a grisaille, and then I put them on my head. I take them off from time to time, but I used to hold this piece of red plexiglass in front of me, and then I needed that hand for other things, so I just take them from my head down, check my values, take them up again. That's it.
Oh, okay, cool. I've heard of the red plexiglass trick too. I've seen people using it back when I was a student at the academy. Gosh, I already have glasses. I don't know if I could use those red glasses though.
No, probably not. We do have people who put them over them.
Oh, yeah, sometimes I do that with sunglasses.
We don't have clip-ons.
Yeah.
But they're really great, especially if you're learning values. They're really terrific.
Yeah, it really simplifies the scene down.
Yeah.
At least my experiences with the plexiglass. Yeah. Cool. Now, one of the things I should mention, one of the little secrets about painting waves is that they're what I would call fractal. And so fractal shapes, it's kind of confusing to think about what they might mean. But basically, if you think of a broccoli, if you break up one broccoli down and you take the head and you take the smaller bits off, what you still have the exact same broccoli, except a miniature version. And you do it again, and the same thing, you still have a broccoli. And if you do it again, you still have a broccoli, except it's just really, really, really small. What that means is that the shapes are self-similar. The big shapes are similar to the small shapes on it. And that is the same thing in terms of waves. if you ever are out swimming in the ocean and you see there are these big waves out in the distance, you look at those big waves and you look at those big waves and they're just a bunch of little tiny waves on top of that big wave. When it comes to the actual little curls that come up the barrel, those are also fractal. Fractal shapes sometimes can describe.
Okay, so anyway, we were talking about value specs earlier. We have a prize to give away today, and we're going to give that away after the replays. We'll pick from the comments, but you can get them at painttube.tv/specs. Great Christmas presents, by the way. We also have a thing called a brush clip, an easel brush clip, which is a cool Christmas present. If you would like to have our free book, 201 Essential Plein Air Tips, just go to outdoorpainter.com. That's our website for Plein Air Magazine, outdoorpainter.com/ebook. All right. And we're waiting for Patrick to come back. Okay, Patrick, let's see if your audio's there.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you back.
Yeah. Somewhat embarrassing. I think the problem is people keep calling me.
Yeah.
I've had, so I got out, I'm back in, everything's good. I
You're
was
a
talking about
popular guy.
fractals a second ago. I just have errands and things I need to do. So fractals. What fractals mean when it comes to the waves of the water is they're really spiky, they're kind of mountainy. What fractals mean when it comes to the shape of these curls is they're spirally. They have these spirally shape. So they have big spiral shapes, and then if you look at the small shapes, there are some small spirals in on them. And the other key to this is you need to make sure that you capture the feeling of the actual barrel of the wave, the way that it curves up. And it doesn't curve up like a perfect semicircle. It really rises slowly, and then at the very tippy top, it curls up and breaks over. So these barrels aren't a perfect semicircle, but they're more of a gradual peak up until it breaks over at the top. And that's why it's at the tip top that we have this lighter value. It's just at the tippy top.
And that's the sun coming through.
Yeah, so that's the transparency of the water over in there.
Cool.
Yeah. So,
if you guys have any questions, make sure to put them in the comments and we will answer them for you.
one of the things about creating a detailed painting versus a more broader painting, so you talked about those spec brushes earlier. I wish there was something called a detail specs, but an idea of you're looking at small things instead of looking at big things, because there's somewhat of a mental shift that happens when I'm painting, where I have to switch gears from looking at the big picture, establishing these big color relationships, establishing the composition, into really looking at the small tiny details. And so those small details are the small details of these shapes of the whitewater.
It's called squinting to get the big shapes.
Ooh, touche.
Touche, baby. And of course, if you want to take your value specs and spray some clear varnish or something on them, that'll make them fuzzy. And then now you can see big shapes.
Yeah. Well, maybe my problem is that my prescription's outdated, and so I actually need a good prescription, and then I'll be able to see detail right.
Yeah, okay.
But I do have a tendency to broaden my paintings, and so when I'm able to work in the studio, sit down really close to my painting, I can really start working in on some of these details. So edges, I want to have a variety of edges. I want to have a variety of texture in a painting generally. That's one of the things that distinguish a studio painting from a plein air painting to me. It's a level of refinement. It's a level of draftsmanship. It's a level of detail. So in here, I'm going to instead of making this one big generic shape, I'm going to try to mix in some variety. And also, what often happens down here is there's often a little line just at the very bottom of the foam that helps with creating just the very edge right in there. So usually this will be the darkest point right under here, because there's even more ambience as this barrel curves over and falls in. So the darkest point of this wave in here is usually right there, because that's the deepest water with the most amount of occlusive shadow. Occlusion rather than a direct, it means it's sort of a soft shadow.
That's a big word.
Dark. I just don't know any smaller word for it. That's my problem. Because it's a very specific idea. You know, when you're out painting architecture, you look at little alleyways or look at little corners, they get darker because less light filters in through those cracks. So that's exactly what's happening here.
I want to know who in our audience is going to try to do this, is going to try to do their first wave or try to do a wave based on what you've seen here. Put a comment in the comments section.
Oh, well, wave painting, I think wave painting is a lot of fun. You know, I'm not working from any reference right now because I sort of am just making this up. You can cut to a point after you've painted enough waves, you understand how waves work, where, you know, you can really design it. And I started this painting outside in plein air. It was a workshop I organized on the Jersey coast because that's where I live. But so I started this painting in plein air. And the thing with plein air painting waves is, you know, the waves come and go in a split second. So even when you're painting a wave in plein air, you still have to kind of make it up with your understanding of how waves
because it's
work.
moving so quickly.
Exactly.
So Dale asks, is there a dark area just under the very upper rim of the curl? And would it be a shadow?
If there is a direct light source, there is. And even in ambient light, there can be an ambient occlusive, well, it's more of an ambient shadow at the very tip top. Because this white water, as it goes up, because it's not transparent like the white water, I like just the normal water. So this white water, this foam, it's opaque. As it curls up, its value gets darker. And at the very top, you know, there's a point where this wave, the shoulder of the wave isn't quite cresting. And so it's sort of at a slanted point. And then the wave comes up until it's upright. And then it travels over and it breaks. And so there's a point where that plane goes from being slightly upwards to being upright to then being slightly slanted over. And so that slightly slanted over, that's the point where this opaque water will get darkest. But you'll notice that when you're out there on the ocean, if you're standing there in front of real life, you'll notice that this white water, it sort of gets stretched over and it rarely comes up to the very tip of the wave. You know, it usually comes up, but the water, it somehow dissipates. I don't know the exact science between why it happens. I just know it does, and that's something you see over and over again. So sorry. Hope everyone's still seeing it. So this painting that I finished, you'll notice that there's a whole bunch of foam. And so the amount of water that we actually see is minimal, and there's a cast shadow from the top of the barrel, but up to here, you'll see the moment where the shoulder of the wave comes up and it's just upright to where it becomes sort of slanted to where it actually starts to curl over and create a shadow on itself.
Cool. It's very helpful. So
Yeah.
Somebody asked about the white that you're using. You're using 100% lead white, Kremitz white, right?
Yeah, when I'm painting in plein air, and I guess I should mention that it's a Michael Harding white. That's my favorite, and at this point, I only use their colors. They're pretty great. Sometimes I use titanium white. When I do use titanium white, it's their titanium white number 3 with dryers, because I don't like how titanium white takes weeks to dry sometimes. But right now, it's just lead white, and lead white is helpful because of the texture that it gets.
I want
So
to tell everybody that they have to be careful. Lead white is illegal in some countries. It's dangerous if you use it wrong.
yeah, don't eat it. You're right.
Don't eat it. Don't get it on your hands. Lead white is banned in Canada, says Steve.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well,
And where in New Jersey are you, Patrick?
so I'm not actually even near the coast. I'm very close to New York City in Bergen County, close to exit. Well, I'm really close to
54.
New York City in North Jersey.
Okay, cool.
If you're from Jersey, you usually tell people where you are, what exit on the Garden State Parkway you are.
Yeah.
But I don't need to get into that. So right now I'm using just a really small brush, getting some more of these tiny details, adding little flecks, making a really interesting shape, designing it.
I painted water last night. This is helpful.
Well, Eric, you're from Texas though. What kind of water was it?
Well, I was in Florida
Oh,
and
nice.
I didn't do any plein air painting this week in Florida, but there was an incredible sunset hitting the clouds. I posted a photo on my Instagram. I decided to do a gouache painting of it last night, which was really a challenge.
That sounds like fun.
It was fun.
Yeah, I want to go to Florida, escape the winter cold.
All right,
Maybe
well,
next month or 2 months.
come on down.
No. All right. Is there anything else that I should cover? Sometimes it's helpful using a really small brush to get in on these little peaks. As the wave's peaking over here, sometimes the little foam comes up. And so that's a fun outline. And that really makes this wave start to pop now.
Patrick, we got about 5 minutes, and then you're going to have to go away. So
Okay.
maybe just do your final touch-up details. I want to know in the comments what everybody's doing for Thanksgiving, if you have it where you live. Dale asks, do you always include a horizon line?
Ooh, good question. I almost do. I know there are a couple wave painters out there that I really admire where they sometimes just take the single wave, like their composition might be just this, but my personal taste is I like to include the horizon line. I don't always include the shoreline though, but I find it really helpful to have the horizon line because that lets me help harmonize my painting, because the sky actually has a huge effect on the water, because the water is just part of its environment. And so the sky, what's happening in the sky, if it's an overcast day, if it's a sunny blue day, that has a big impact on what's actually happening with the temperature of the water. So if I were starting this in plein air, the big things that I need to keep in mind when I start are obviously the composition. So I need to make up a composition that I think will be interesting, that relates enough to what's actually happening in the day. On this day, there was a lot of interesting surf. So I tried to have this really interesting wave in the foreground that brought your eye in, it leads you in around, and make it somewhat of a circular painting that really draws your attention into this wave. But then the first steps of the actual painting is I'm blocking in the big shapes, the big color masses. You know, the sky I paint in half a minute, this I paint in half a minute. I can really get the painting looking like what it looked like when I started this, when I scraped it down after I had to scrape down all the sand off after I dropped it in. That stage, I try to get to that stage as quickly as I can, maybe in 10, 15 minutes. And then there's usually a whole lot of refinement that I'll try to do in plein air. But I try to get the color right. And so the sky is really helpful to get the color right of the rest of the painting. Long story short.
Okay, cool. Hey, why don't you come on camera and say goodbye so people can see your handsome mug.
That's it.
Yeah, Patrick. Well, we ran out of time, but you did a terrific job. Everybody's raving about what a great lesson this was. And we will post Patrick's email and Instagram and website and all that stuff on the comments so that everybody can find it. Patrick, thank you so much. You did a really terrific job. Any final thoughts on wave painting?
Thanks, Eric. I guess if I could say one thing before I go, just so people know, this was a workshop demo that I did. And so what I've started doing is organizing workshops on my own. So New Jersey, I'm probably going to have one next year in 2024, at least one, maybe two. And so if anyone would be interested in doing a painting workshop with me, I have a mailing list for that. You can find it on my
Cool.
Instagram. You can find it on my website. I don't know if you could actually link the mailing list in there, but it's
We'll try.
accessible in a few different places.
Terrific.
And yeah, then, you know, a lot of these paintings, I have a different mailing list for my collectors. I'm having a little holiday sale where I'm selling off a bunch of really small plein air paintings like this one. And so you can find out more about that on my Instagram because I've just been yapping all about it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thanks. Okay. Well, it was fabulous, Patrick. Thank you so much for doing this today. And we're really, really honored to have you on the show. I like you very much. I like your painting very much. I think you're a good guy. You're a good teacher. Everybody give him thumbs up and applause, and we'll have you back.
All right. Thanks so much, Eric.
And when you let me know when you're going to be in Florida, I'm going to be spending a lot more time there. We'll go painting together, and I know exactly where to go to get waves.
Oh, that sounds like a fun idea.
Yeah, I mean, where I live is, I have a place there. Where I live is the surfing capital of Florida, so big waves.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, maybe we'll go surfing. And have you ever painted on top of a surfboard?
You know, I've never surfed. It looks like a lot of fun. I know that studying waves, a lot of the infographics, if you go on Google, you can find a lot of interesting information from surfers about waves, how waves form, the shapes of waves, the different parts of the wave. So I'm sure if you learn surfing, you get to know waves really well. Probably.
Outstanding. Well, Patrick Okrasinski, thank you so much for being on today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric.
All right. Okay, guys. Well, we'll be back. Make sure to subscribe to this channel on YouTube. If you're watching, even if you're not watching on YouTube, go to YouTube, search Eric Rhoads Art School Live, and subscribe, because we got to get those numbers up, baby. Get them up. I think we're at 117,000 or something like that. And so we got to hit a bigger number. We got to keep going for the top, right? We're not stopping until we get to 100 million. Okay. Have a terrific day. Thanks again to Patrick, and we will see you tomorrow at 12 noon on Art School Live. Bye-bye.